Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of GasCast. I am your host, Max Alderson, joined as always by Tom Metcalf. Hi, Mets.
Hey up.
This week we're joined by James Piercy, who is the sports editor at the Bristol Post. Thanks for coming on the pod, James.
Cheers, lads.
James, you broke the story on the fruit market development a few weeks ago. What's the latest?
I mean, I'm going to come across as a little bit political on this, which is not what I'm trying to do, obviously, because I would love to drop a neutron bomb of an exclusive. But basically the position is as it was. There is an interested party as the report, I'm going to go over old ground to an extent, but it's a UK-based consortium are obviously interested in buying Bristol Rovers via the purchase of the land at the fruit market and the surrounding area. And quite simply, there's an offer on the table. As I understand, a number of shareholders have agreed to that offer, but the majority shareholder, which is, I think, everyone joining the dots, is Total Produce. They are yet to make a decision, and consequently, it's still as it was in terms of talks are ongoing. The consortium feels a good offer. Whether or not they're willing to raise their bid, I'm not sure, but there's an offer presented, and it's basically up to Total Produce. It sounds very basic, but it's up to Total Produce whether or not they wish to accept that offer, and then they're essentially kingmaker in this deal as majority shareholder. Obviously, Nick Matthews has been vocal in his kind of reticent sort of attitude towards the bid, given the history of that site, and there is no timeline as such, but I think there has to be a decision has to be made sooner rather than later whether or not it's going to be accepted. But it's the offer is on the table. There's been no yes or no. There's obviously been discussions, but it is a simple economic business decision from Total Produce's point of view.
Okay, yeah, sure. So do you think it was interesting that the club sort of came out and announced it publicly before this decision was then made?
Well, the club didn't. There was nothing on the club website. There was nothing, while Al-Khadi obviously spoke to BBC Radio Bristol before the Blackpool game, said what he said. There was the use of we a lot, but obviously we saw nothing on the Bristol Rovers website. So whether or not that's a club statement or is that a Weil Al-Khadi statement, I'm not sure. But was it? Sorry, what was the question? Was it interesting?
Was it an interesting angle? Do you think it was a political sort of move rather than more than just letting the fans know what was going on?
I think from an outsider looking in, I think he was kind of thinking as a fan to an extent, which is very much taps into his qualities as a president, that he, for all kind of the criticism of him, and maybe we'll get into this, I don't know, but he does have that kind of sort of subconscious connection with the fans. And I think from him saying that, I think that was as much as him kind of speaking of his own excitement. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. I don't know. Personally, I think as a club president, there should be a little bit more professionalism perhaps to something like that, because it is an extremely sensitive issue and there's still a heck of a lot of a way to go. So perhaps he jumped the shark to an extent, but at the same time, because of his kind of emotional connection to the club, which again, maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing, depending on your viewpoint. But because of that kind of motivated him to say that.
I see. Yeah, I get what you're saying, because as the president's role, you've also got to, I guess, consider the fans who were over the summer probably a little bit agitated at the lack of communication, especially over the last 12 months, and the lack of any sort of future plan following the collapse of the UE. So maybe, I mean, from my point of view, looking at it, it could potentially even be maybe just trying to get some fans back on board and optimistic rather than, the negative cloud over the club. Do you think that could potentially be the case as well?
Yeah, I mean, you had the Will Smith photo shoot, which was kind of it. Because of his kind of desire to sort of please and appease, he often puts his foot in his mouth and says things that perhaps he shouldn't, which is great in a way. You know, it's obviously great from our point of view. Great from our point of view, and I'm not saying that, you know, but it is, and obviously it's great from the fans' point of view because they do want to hear, they do want developments, but at the same time, what would you prefer? Would you prefer X amount of months of radio silence and then actually something tangible happening, or would you prefer constant little drip feeds of information that may or may not come to fruition? And not that anything he said perhaps he potentially put any kind of deal in jeopardy. It wasn't perhaps the right time to say what he said.
Personally, from my point of view as a fan, I think it's a good thing that he's told the fans that this is going to happen, because I think it's just given us a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Whereas over the summer, I think it was a bit of doom and gloom. You know, our manager on paper isn't the most exciting. Our squad isn't the most exciting either. And I think this has given us something. It's given us a direction, really. And I think that's what the fans sort of needed as a fan base. So from that side of things, you know, I don't think he's drip feeding, so to speak. I think it was just potentially something that is tangible in the future. And I don't think it was. Well, it's hard to say. I don't know the risks involved, but I guess they've seen it as a not really a risky thing to put out there, because
I mean, what
maybe in a good position.
Without, and again, sorry to sound political in any way, it wasn't the basically the consortium that are interested in buying the club and the various plans that have kind of been formulated were keen to keep it on the down low. They were very much keen to keep it on the down low in terms of their ideas for the fruit market. Would we have run the story the following week if it wasn't for what Weil said? It's difficult but what he said kind of opened up opportunities to then get information to formulate that story. Had he not said that, it may well have been kept secret. I know, and before I, sorry to the listeners, but in terms of the general chat on the forums and whatnot and all that, that was always kind of going on in the background. But him kind of emerging with that news opened it up to an extent to come into the public domain, when I would say there's people involved who perhaps preferred that to stay a little bit quieter than it did.
Do you know, sorry, just jump in. Do you know if any planning permission issues
no,
have come?
There's been nothing presented to the council in terms of planning. There have been plans, if you like, in terms of what it may or may not look like. But in terms of actual coherent planning permission, in terms of all the various assessments that need to be done on the land, things like transport links, all that sort of stuff. I mean, obviously that is there, but nothing's been presented to anyone who would have a say on planning permission. So I think from a basic sort of process point of view, it is simply secure the purchase of the land by Bristol Rovers Football Club from the Al-Qadi family, and then put the planning permission to the council.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm trying to get at is our Bristol City Council on board for having a stadium at that site, and they're happy, because I know they're trying to redevelop the whole St Philip's area anyway, so I assume, and it's just my assumption, that they'd be happy with a stadium there to redevelop the land, but assumptions don't make.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, when you look at it and you look at that area, you don't have a huge residential problem. In terms of residents complaining about a potential football stadium and the problems that may or may not, logistical problems that may or may not result in, and you have a huge opportunity to develop what could be a very aesthetically pleasing part of the city and open up the city to countless opportunities. So, looking at the X's and O's in terms of the potential owners of Bristol Rovers, they're looking at it beyond merely owning Bristol Rovers Football Club. This is an investment opportunity. Let's make no bones about it. They're not, without stating they're not lifelong Bristol Rovers fans who have been season ticket holders for 40 years, who, they're benevolent. There is an investment opportunity there for them beyond the football club. The football club is important. Of course it's important. They are football fans. They do, the idea of owning a football club is very appealing. But it's also that development and what that development can bring. And then from the council's point of view, as my understanding is, that is something that very much will be appealing to them. from the council's point of view, it should be added as well in terms of the fruit market, because as Nick Matthews said on BBC Radio Bristol, in terms of, there's some 300 employees and that should be considered massively in kind of this discussion. There is provisions to move the fruit market site to something that remains logistically sensible and practical for them, so there's not a huge uprooting of their livelihood and whatnot. So it's kind of there's a lot of moving parts, but obviously the fruit market site is absolutely integral to anything that's going to happen. And would the council be on board? Yes. I mean that's something. Weil was pro. What was his quote? The councillor pro enterprise or something. It was something like that. I mean, yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, James. That's hopefully that's given the listeners a little bit of insight into the story and a little bit more detail about some of the things that the Bristol Post reported on a couple of weeks ago. Let's move on to the on the pitch matters. It's been a good week and a half for Rovers. Last time we recorded, I think we were a little bit under the weather in terms of our response to the opening games, but our last 3 games, it's been 2 really good league wins, a 2-0 win at home to Tranmere and a very surprising 3-1 home win against Oxford, and then last night a 2-1 loss at home to Brighton, but some encouraging play. Let's start with the formation, because that's probably what prompted the positive results. Now Coughlan, as we know, played that 4-4-2 diamond, which wasn't too successful, other than getting us a couple of positive results towards the tail end of last season. He's changed it to a 3-5-2 with wing backs, which has been a big improvement from my point of view, and I think a lot of fans feel the same. Mets, why don't you start us off? Why do you think this formation works compared to the 4-4-2 diamond?
I think it works because the diamond was there primarily to stop other teams playing, whereas 3-5-2 seems to be get out wide to Leahy and Hare, get it in for JCH to get his bonce on the end of it. Fantastic stuff. And it also, as we were speaking about earlier, it seems to have freed up that midfield free rather than being the kind of cloggers that they were before. They're now able to play, and we've seen that especially with Upson. But even with the back 3, they've been absolutely brilliant as well. So it's kind of, it's made us much wider, much more of an attacking threat, I think, more than just setting up to defend and then hope JCH pulls something out of his arse to win us a game. We're definitely more on the front foot, except for the Oxford game. I think we're massively behind in possession. We were under the cosh for massive parts of that game, but the Tranmere game especially, we were on top of them for, all of it, I'd say. Pretty much they didn't really have a sniff until they went down to 9. So it's much more entertaining to watch as well, which I think is something we've all been wanting out of Coughlan, because it's been pretty rubbish to watch, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that 4-4-2 diamond has always been pretty uninspiring. James, 5 at the back, I guess it could be seen as 5 at the back, is generally seen as quite a negative formation. But Rovers seem to definitely play it higher up the pitch with the wing backs getting higher. Do you think it's an ambitious move from Coughlan?
When Graham Coughlan said at the start of the summer, his major task, as well as replacing players who had left and in terms of the general squad building, was to find more pace and width. And he's he has, to his credit, tried in the transfer market, hasn't quite succeeded for a number of reasons, financial being one of them. But essentially, he's had to look at what he's got. Okay, so what have I got in my squad, and how can I get width out of that team? Okay, so Rodman, Bennett, that's been sort of trial. Blackpool, they both sort of played off Victor Adeboyejo. Didn't work out. But obviously, he's brought in Josh Hare, who's a different kind of, if you call him a fullback, because I don't think he's a fullback in the truest sense, but if you call him a fullback, but he's a different kind of fullback that Rovers had from last season on the right hand side. Anyway, he's more in the offensive. I mean, when he signed, his whole chat was about, I love getting forward. Obviously, his numbers for Eastleigh back that up in terms of his assists, his goals. Coughlan's looked at his squad. Okay, he's got. And it's very basic in a way, but it's like sounds very simple. But I've got 3 pretty good centre backs. I can only play 2 of them. Why don't I play all 3 of them? Okay, I've got a very good... And we also have to say kind of circumstance plays into this, because obviously Mark Little's injury has allowed Josh Hare to come into the team. But he never looked quite comfortable as a right fullback. But moving him into that 5, given that width, Leahy as well looks way more comfortable as a left wing back. He hasn't perhaps had the same impact as Hare, but they just look as players. They don't have to. They're not so preoccupied defensively, because obviously Kilgore's naturally left coming across, Davis naturally right coming across. I think as well, watching them last couple of games, you look at the kind of connections on the field, and Leahy and Kilgore have got this kind of understanding. You watch Alfie Kilgore, he's always talking to him in terms of positioning on and off the ball. Same with Davis and Hare, because obviously that's their immediate kind of like passing lane, if you like. Coughlan's looked at his squad. Okay, Bennett's an obvious kind of man that you can use to kind of stretch the field, but it hasn't quite worked out. So he's gone back to the fullbacks, and he's got this kind of clutch of centre midfielders that he all kind of likes. He likes Upson, he likes Agogo, obviously, because he signed him, and he likes Ollie Clark very much because he gave him the captaincy. Okay, so how can I keep them in the team and then ensure some width? And the diamond wasn't working out for a number of reasons we know. But with that kind of 5, I don't really... Yeah, no, it's not. Ultimately, to go back to your question, it's not negative at all, because he's got the fullbacks who can push on. And the great thing about Josh Hare as well, we're only... How many games he played? 5-6 games, 4-5 games into what, his first proper season in League One. And I know he's kind of in his mid-20s, so he's not quite a young player. But in terms of experience, he's still got a long way to go. There's still a ceiling for him. And if you look at what he's bringing, and we talk about Clark Harris as a target man, in terms of that's another connection as well. Obviously, his cross at the Oxford game was absolutely fantastic. And I know I'm talking about Josh Hare a lot here. I don't mean to I have been impressed with him, but I do think these guys are massively intrinsic to how Rovers are going to attack. And even when Mark Little comes back, because Mark Little's pretty good going forward as well, but it's just kind of freed up the field, and it's just basic. Where are the players positioned and the space they give? Because the diamond, it was so cramped. Agogo, Upson, 5-yard passes, one to you, one to me, and then I give it away. It is hard, and it just kind of the team just feels so much more freer.
Absolutely, I 100% agree, and I think Josh Hare is quickly becoming my favourite Rovers player.
Big. It's a big shout.
That is massive shout.
He's
big shout.
He's everything I want to see in a fullback. Like you were saying, if you compare him to Partington and James Clark, who are pretty defensive-minded fullbacks who are being tried to play in that 4-4-2 diamond and offer width with nothing in front of them, I think Hare is such an upgrade, and Little as well. But Hare being forced into that side through the injury of Mark Little, he's absolutely shined, and I don't think any of us really expected that, and it's been a joy to see. Mets, does Mark Little get back into this side for you?
Absolutely not, no. I think Graham's always said, if you play well, you make a claim for the jersey, you keep it, and I think Hare undoubtedly has. His crosses in for JCH on both his right foot and his left foot have been incredible. He doesn't try and beat a man, he just gets a bit of space, whips it, and he has got a whip on him as well. And I can't see Mark Little, unless there's like an injury or Mark Little is seriously impressing in training, he ain't getting ahead of him at the minute.
Yeah, I mean Mark was brought in, I think, primarily to be our starting right back, but I agree with what you're saying. Coughlan's always said no players guaranteed the jersey, they have to fight for it, and Josh has definitely staked a claim. But could this be a potential problem down the line with Mark Little potentially expecting to be starting a certain amount of games this season?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the other thing you have to consider with Mark Little as well, he, especially if you've got the 3 as well, he could come into centre-back. I do, as great as Tony Craig is, to expect him to play 45, play 46 games again.
44 now.
Sorry, apologies. To play an entire season is hugely ambitious.
You better hope he doesn't hear that, because he'll come down and
I know.
I agree with what you're saying. Yeah.
See you guys later. But so in terms of Davis slots into the middle, Little comes into the right of the 3. that's clearly a tactical option. So, and also as well, because the other thing as well, you have to, from Graham Coughlan's point of view, he still obviously has his plans, he has his ideas and what he wants the team, but he's still learning about these players. He's still learning about Josh Hare's strengths, attributes, weaknesses. Josh Hare's still learning about Graham Coughlan's strength. In terms of Luke Lee, he obviously knew about. He wouldn't have signed him, but he's still, in terms of working with them. So as we get further into the season, there will be games that won't be a Josh Hare type of game. It will be a Mark Little type of game, because perhaps he will be that little bit more, kind of offer that little bit more of the sort of defensive solidity that Hare doesn't quite have. Maybe it's a physical thing, maybe it's an experience thing. Lots of different parts. But so yeah, I think of course, and it's why you have a squad, and you can't expect that same five. I mean, it may happen, I don't know, but for them to kind of see out the season, if you like, especially now we're not even in September yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting what you say about Graham almost stumbled upon this formation through trial and error almost, and it's interesting that it's worked so well. I mean, the midfield three have looked very good. The back three have been very solid. The fullbacks have been immense. The two strikers have worked very well together, struck up a partnership almost, and even the players off the bench have been very good. And it's I think I'm not sure how much of it has been coincidence, through trial and error, like I said, or how much of it has been Coughlan thinking, okay, this is how I get the best out of these players, because surely he would have started the season with this formation.
Yeah, I mean, we do. The thing is, football is a sport. The reason it's why we love it, because everything is so reactive and inconsistent, and it's ultimately how you kind of how things happen and how you react to those situations. And I think the way the season's played out in a very embryonic stage, it has fallen into place, but also the decisions have been made to do that. So he could still be playing a diamond. That's the thing. He could still be persevering with this diamond formation, because in his head, I don't want to lose games. Obviously, after the Coventry result,
he was saying he was going too gung ho.
He was gung ho. Really? But in effect, the formation he's now reverted to is more gung ho.
More attacking, yeah.
It is more attacking, but at the same time, because you have that kind of athleticism down the flanks, you have a go obviously covering. It is and it isn't, and I just it's not always one or the other. There can't. He's just kind of like found the solution. I think for all his detractors, it's credit to him as a manager that he hasn't been, because there was some criticism obviously in terms of his sort of stubborn refusal to kind of move away from the diamond. Well, I think he has sort of looked at the team and thought, well, if I want to take, because again, the other thing with him is, and if I'm sounding a bit like a sort of part of the Graham Coughlan fan club here, but he does want to make Bristol Rovers a more attractive team. He wants his big thing is, I want to give the fans a team to be proud of. And he has looked at what he was doing, and the gung-ho comment backfired, but he's looked at what he's doing. He was like, it's not working. It's not working. And the good thing is, you're at a stage of the season where you can experiment, because, okay, you can lose a couple of games, okay, fans, pressure, all this kind of thing. But you can't experiment in February, March, April. If you're going to work things out, you've got to work them out now. And, okay, things will happen down the line. What happens if Davis and Kilgore get injured in a month? That completely throws all the plans up in the air. But as it stands, it's a great fit for the squad he's got, and he's getting the best out of the players in what he's got. In a transfer window where he hasn't been able to sign exactly who he wanted, all the types of players who he wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with what you're saying there. It is credit to him that he has been open to change and trying different things, and I definitely agree that it's the right time of season to do it, and it's getting results. Metz, do you think he maybe suffers from being a defensive coach, that people almost judge him before they think that he's going to be too negative? If he was, say, a strikers coach and doing these things, do you think he'd be getting a lot more praise?
No, I think I think he's deserved it, to be honest. He's been so defensive last season. He was, like, with the diamond, like we were saying, it's only now, the last, 3 games, that he's actually gone for it with the 3-5-2. And you feel like before then, like last season, like he was saying, at the start of this season, he said, last season, that was to get results. We had to stay in the league. You're absolutely fine with that. Like, no bother. We stayed up. No worries. And then he came out in the summer and said, right, we're going to play a bit more expansive. We're going to entertain the fans. And then we got the same diamond. We're playing defensively again. And you're like, what are you doing? Like, he signed the attacking fullbacks, but then played a formation where it wasn't easy for them to get up. In a 4, fullbacks getting up, you're leaving your centre-backs horrendously exposed, even with the diamond. It feels like a stumble, like he stumbled on it. I'm probably not giving him enough credit, because we've said it before, we didn't really think he was that much of a kind of tactical genius. Maybe he stumbled on it. Maybe he's actually sat down and thought, right, these are the players I've got. This is what I should do. But at 3-5-2, it's so much more attacking. It's so much better to watch, and it obviously gets the fans on side. And I don't think that would be any difference if he was a attacking coach, a midfield coach, goalkeeping coach. It's what you see on the pitch which counts, not what your job title was before you were manager.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough.
But to your point, in terms of his defensive coach, if you look at this team, in terms of the identity of this team, it still lies with the centre of defence. In terms of, if Craig, Davis, Kilgore are all playing well, Rovers are fine. They are the kind of the fundamental core of this team for a number of reasons, and he's still absolutely intrinsic to his kind of philosophy as a coach to have and manager to have a strong defence that also, in terms of who they are as people, bring character to the team. In terms of what Davis brings to the dressing room, what he brings to the pitch. Craig, in terms of his organisation, calm head, seen it, done it. So what? I've been here tens of times before throughout my career. And then Kilgore, who ridiculous in terms of his kind of leadership and organisation at his age. They are still very much what Graham Coughlan's team are about. Even more so than when you look at like Johnson Clark Harris and what he does. That's great, but it's not. Coughlan's team remains within the defence, but you can still do that and have the expansive football, as he's proved.
Yeah, I think that's I agree with you. It's very much fundamental to him that he has a good defence before he then looks at the attack and how to score goals, because maybe it is his defensive coach mindset that lends to that. But I agree, it's tremendous what he's done to that back line, and also now introduced these new attacking ideas, especially from the wing backs. That's given us far more balance than we had maybe last season, and it is getting the results. So long may it continue, I say. Let's talk a little bit about the midfield, which we slated quite aggressively on the last episode by saying that they were not built for the diamond. They didn't have the control, the one-touch football, the pace, the movement. They were too defensive-minded. And now those same... Well, we've got rid of Circum completely from the squad, it seems. I don't know if he's been...
I think he's injured.
He's injured, I see, okay. But the 3 defensive-minded central midfielders, Upson, Agogo and Ollie Clark, have been the 3 midfielders who have started, and they look at like 3 completely new players. It's I can't get my head around it. Mets, what's going on there? Why has this midfield been invigorated? And where do you start with it?
Yeah, it's a weird one. I think Upson's had a bit of an upturn in form. Obviously, he's the new Messi, so he's fantastic.
Xavi.
Xavi, I should say. I've always rated him anyway, but last season I thought he was underperforming, whereas this season, especially last night against Brighton, he was everywhere. I've never seen him run so much, and that's what confidence does for you, I think. Ollie Clark looks like he's getting on the ball a bit more, taking the game by the scruff of the neck, doing the kind of like captaincy stuff, which I've slated him for probably the last 2 years. Agogo is pretty much playing his exact same game. But I think what you said, James, is right, is that they've got a little bit more space. They're not... The 5-yard pass to me to you isn't happening anymore. They can look up and look to get it wide or up to JCH or Smith or Nichols or whoever. They've just got options around them rather than just other defensive-minded midfielders. I think the change of shape has absolutely transformed them from just having space in front of them either to run into or play into. It's just made a massive difference. And actually what you were saying about Circum is completely right. When we're playing someone like Bennett or Circum at the tip of the diamond, that's the focus for those three defensive midfielders. Get it into that number 10 and see what they can do. Whereas now you've got, okay, I can play it left, I can play it right, I can play it up, I can play it back. They've got a lot more options, a lot more freedom.
I agree with everything you said there. It's almost like Upson has been given the freedom to go forwards more rather than sit at the base of the diamond. Agogo's doing a bit more of the dirty work, and he's doing it very, very well. And Ollie Clark is almost integral in the counter-attack in his dribbling and ball-carrying ability. James, do you want to talk about Ed Upson for a bit? Do you think he's now become the player who we signed him to be?
You said Messi, and I'm sorry I pulled you up and Javi, but you're right with the Messi because they're running against Brighton last night.
Yes, in the box. It was absolutely amazing.
Well, it just kind of went on, and it went on, and it went on, and it just didn't quite get there. But no, to go back, I mean, the thing is with Ed Upson, and it's a little bit like, this is like high intelligence football, but positionally, I think Ed Upson is fantastic. He's always available for a pass. He reads the game exceptionally well. Okay, what it looks like he does, and he's this kind of textbook defensive centrally midfielder who makes very straightforward passes, but often that's what you need. He makes the simple pass. The trouble was when it was this kind of congested midfield area, often there wasn't a simple pass, but now it's opened up. He can do that. He's an intelligent guy. He thinks about the game an awful amount. Just chatting to him in terms of his kind of like appreciation of analysis and kind of research into his own game and opponents. He's very big on that. And I think having him I actually think against Brighton first half, I think I put it in the match ratings, I didn't actually think he was that kind of impactful in the first half. I think the game kind of went by him a bit, but it was reflective upon his influence that he can have on the team, that as he played better, Rovers took a little bit more control and they kind of had a bit more kind of impetus in the final third. I know he's not strictly an attacking player, but he does kind of set the tempo. He does move the ball well. And yeah, I mean, as you can probably tell, I think he's a pretty good footballer.
I think also with the Brighton game especially, Graham kept telling, like down on the side that I was kind of sat by, kept telling Leahy to get right up on their fullback, and he was telling Hare to do on the same thing. And it helped because although we were leaving gaps in behind, Brighton were then resorting to long ball. Not resorting to, but they could see the space and they were trying long ball up to that 19 million kiddie, the really rapid one, number 46. I can't remember his name. But it just didn't come off for him at all. And even if it did get anywhere near what are admittedly big centre-backs, it was just going straight back, and that played massively into our hands. And this is another reason why I kind of had another level of appreciation for Graham, because he could see what was happening tactically, is they were playing out from the back to their fullbacks, and it was going wherever it was going. Whereas when we pushed on our wing-backs onto their fullbacks, they had to go long. And I was just like, I can see that, and I can see he's making a tactical decision. And I was really impressed. Massively impressed.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I think a lot of people assume that Graham doesn't have that tactical knowledge, and it's a case of, like I said, the defensive coach side of things. People are just assuming that he doesn't have that in his locker, but we're starting to see now that maybe he does, and it's exciting to see where this team will go.
Just quickly on Graham, which I think sometimes gets lost a bit, is that he's only been a manager for, well, I mean, if you take the actual off-season, it's like 8 months. He's been a full-time football manager.
And he never expected to be.
He's never expected to be. He's learning literally every single game. He doesn't admit it because he's not that kind of guy. But he is learning different ways of managing and how to deal with players and how to deal with game situations against some very, very experienced coaches in League One. So there are going to be issues with what he does. And that's perhaps why he kind of lent on the defensive side, because that's what he knew. That was kind of his comfort zone. But as he knows to progress Rovers, to progress himself, he's having to be a little bit more ambitious. And, there's going to be games where it goes wrong. There is going to be games. But he is although he doesn't seem it, because he kind of seems like this grizzled veteran who's kind of this been there, done that, but he's a young manager in terms of his experience in the dugout, and I think that sometimes gets lost a bit.
Let's move on to the Oxford game, a terrific 3-1 win for Rovers, but the focus is undoubtedly on the returning former prodigal son of Bristol Rovers turned snake Judas, however you want to describe him in less polite terms. Matty Taylor returned to the Memorial Stadium, and the atmosphere is probably the most toxic I've seen it, certainly since Rovers were probably relegated from the Football League. Has it ever been that toxic? Metz, what did you make of the atmosphere?
Well, when I first saw Matthew, I was pleasantly surprised he's got one of the worst haircuts I've ever seen in my life. He obviously hasn't been spending his hard-earned riches at City on his physical appearance. He was also rubbish, which was brilliant. He was absolutely shit, which made my life a joy. Honestly, I was in the Blackthorn, joining in with all the songs, even the horrendous ones. And I think what made me best pleased was when he had a chance at the back post, which a fully in-form, fit Matthew for Rovers taps away 100 times out of 100, and he tripped over the ball, and everyone went wild. So there's a lot of words I could use right now, but I'm being very selective. I thought he was crap, and I think he massively bottled it. I don't think he was injured at all. He didn't limp off at all. He basically fell over the ball and then sat down in the centre circle and was like, oh no, I'm injured. The crowd definitely got to him, which I'm chuffed about. And then he trudged off, clapping, I don't know who to. It wasn't for his own performance because he was crap. And then he appeared at the back of the family, what used to be the family terrace. I don't know why he decided to go up to the hospitality box. Obviously he was going to get abuse. Obviously he was surrounded by stewards, but people were trying to get up in his grill, which is going to happen. He was just an idiot about it. And then he went up in the box, and then everyone was booing him because everyone from the platform could see him. He got a ton more abuse, and then he slithered off to wherever he went. I don't care where he went. So all in all, a good day for Rovers, I'd say, and a bad day for Matthew, whose career has just gone completely down the shitter.
You certainly haven't pulled your punches there, Matt. So you've say it how it is, mate. Say it how it is.
Kill it there.
Now I'm just as emotional about the whole situation, and I was thrilled to see Taylor bottle it. And I agree. I don't think he was injured, but we've obviously got our blue and white quartered spectacles on, James. From a neutral point of view, how did you view Taylor's performances? Obviously, you've seen him play a bit in the red as well whilst watching him for the Post. How do you think he did?
Well, he had a stinker. I don't think. Excuse me. I don't think there's any two ways about that. It was interesting how he lined up for Oxford as the kind of the one in a 4-2-3-1 up front his own, because at City, sorry to say that, he's forever been kind of the support striker, playing off Jesus, often as a substitute, but when he started, he's always kind of been on the shoulder of the striker. And when the thing against Rovers on Saturday was he was playing against the back three, and he was kind of flitting in between. So when Craig was in the middle, he was kind of either trying to get in the left channel between Davis and Craig, or the right channel. But he was always matched up against Kilgore, Davis, physical defenders. And Oxford weren't playing. I think Brannigan, the lad there in the middle, looked really good. But a lot of they were going direct to him. And the incident with Kilgore, which, I don't know if that was a red card or not, sorry, because it kind of happened just outside my eye line. But it was all kind of, he was having to battle with defenders, and it's not his game. If you want to get the best out of Matty Taylor, it's ball to feet. He's playing off flicks. He's doing things kind of outside the penalty area. And when he did get the opportunity to do things outside the penalty, he kind of fell over. That's going to take time for him to get to Oxford, but I think it was a really bad game for him at completely the wrong time, as he kind of finds a new team. When you kind of remove emotion from it and whatnot, it's a very good signing for Oxford if they can get the best out of him.
Absolutely. Well, I don't think any of us are arguing that. I mean,
he's a very, very good League One striker, and he proved it for us. He is a very good footballer.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is it. It's like you say.
He
the
would
wrong
have
occasion.
been. I think it was a unpleasant experience for him from literally the minute that coach pulled into the stadium to when he left. But I think he probably would have been delighted to just get it out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that seemed to be the case when he limped off. I mean, he couldn't get off the pitch quicker. Well, didn't limp at all, did he? Really?
No, he just sauntered off.
Do you think, Mets? Do you think we've got closure on the whole situation now? Do you think we've got closure as fans, or do you think this isn't the end of the saga?
No, I was pretty chuffed with that, but no. Every time he comes to the Mem now, I'm going to give him as much shit as I possibly can.
Of course, I'm not saying that, but
I don't think there is closure, no, because of the circumstances. I think we were so close to getting in the playoffs, and he was our talismanic striker, and the amount of rubbish we got off the Teds, all of the kind of gloating and all that. No, I don't think there'll ever be closure for me.
Yeah, I'm not saying forgiveness. I'm just saying, do you feel a little bit better?
No, not.
I'm not saying forgiveness. I'm saying, do you just feel a little bit better now? Do you have a little bit of a weight lifted?
Yeah.
If I may ask a question, can he do anything to not obviously completely earn his way back into the affections of kind of Gasheads in a wider sense, but can he do anything to kind of temper the anger?
No.
There is literally nothing.
Nothing.
He made it worse for himself, I think, by playing the games that City wanted him to play. The whole snake gifs and the welcome to Bristol and the
champagne moment,
that kind
of stuff. Yeah, he
and even his Instagram post after the game, he said, "Oh, glad they remembered me," and all, giving it like he's got one over on us when he was the one who limped off the pitch pretending to be injured.
Again, he didn't limp.
I'm saying limp hypothetically.
Yeah, I must admit the Instagram post didn't seem somewhat misguided.
He's shown no remorse for it, and he just seems to be playing the victim for going to a bigger club, almost like he doesn't understand why we're angry. We're not angry because he went to a bigger, better club. You know, Bowden, Brown, Harrison, we were all thrilled for them, and they got a great reception when they come back. But the gloating, the snake gif, the laughing about it, almost the making it less of an issue than it is almost made it worse. And I think I don't think he's been very clever with a lot of it.
Yeah, I think his kind of, you mentioned about the kind of the clapping, turn to the Blackthorn, the clapping. I think that's almost a defence mechanism of him to kind of make, and I don't know the bloke, but sort of had limited dealings with him at City, but at the risk of stoking further anger, he's actually quite a nice guy. Quite an amenable. He's not very football-y, if you like. Daft Hare, and not that I want to talk about hair, but Daft Hare aside, he's actually quite a good guy to talk to. And I think you're right. I think it would have got to him. I do think it would have got to him, and his kind of, with that Instagram post, with the clapping, maybe even the kind of the perverse wanting to sit in the box and get more, in a way, to sort of make light of it. I think that was kind of his kind of way of dealing with it, in a way, to make it kind of jokey, but I don't think it's obviously helped his...
No, I don't think he's taken it as seriously as he needs to take it, and I don't think he realises...
Yeah.
He still doesn't realise how bad a thing it was to do, and I don't think...
But I think deep down, I do think there is, and I don't think you can't be in football and not have that understanding, because he's not, he's a relatively smart guy. He's not, again...
Then why not come out and just say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done those things, I shouldn't have gloated like that. It's difficult, isn't it?
The thing is, as well, he's still a Bristol City player. So there is still an element of responsibility to his employer, so he's not going to kind of throw them. So perhaps, because obviously he's out of contract next summer, and I'd be absolutely astonished if he stays at Bristol, and I imagine he will be astonished as well if he stays a Bristol City player beyond next summer. So maybe over time, there will be an element of remorse and understanding, and perhaps when he sits down when he's 45, 50, he will kind of feel the reasons why, but whether or not that would be too late, I don't know.
And at that point, I still won't forgive him.
And on that note, let's move on to more Rovers-related matters. The Brighton game last night, Mats, you were there. You said we switched to a 3-4-1-2 formation at some point. That's interesting, given we were talking about Coughlan's attacking intent. So can you describe that formation to us and how did it work or didn't work?
Yeah, it was a 3-4-1-2.
Great.
No, it's Nichols dropped in behind the strikers when JCH came off. JCH came on and Ollie Clark came off. I think it disrupted us a little bit. I think the width really helped. I think it did make us a little bit narrower, and it meant that Brighton were getting in down the flanks a little bit more. I can see why Coughlan did it, because he thought, last 20 minutes, let's go for it, let's try and win, which I was absolutely chuffed with. I have to say, it was like being back in the DC era when we used to go for games in the last 20. But yeah, I do think it did unsettle us a little bit. But then Tom Nichols absolutely leathered one in, so I'm just an idiot paying to watch them play football. So
absolutely. That sort of brings us on to the player spotlight for this week, which is Tom Nichols himself. He's a player who's very much divided opinion here on the podcast, let alone the fan base of Bristol Rovers Football Club. He's like the ex you don't want to go back to, but you keep getting tempted to go back to. I've closed the door on him myself. I'm like, no, he's not good enough. I've seen what Smith offers, which is the same technical level, but with a goal-scoring threat and an intent to get in the box. But now Nichols has scored 2 and 2. I'm almost like, well, do I buy back into the Nichols?
You're
Nichols
always
hype?
the first one to go back to him as well. You're the first one to text him at 3 a.m. You up? It's always you. 2 and 2, fantastic. He did miss that horrendous 1-on-1 against Tranmere, and I've got that in the back of my mind while I'm thinking about how well he played last night, and he did play well. And the fans got behind him as well, like I was saying a minute ago about the DC era. It's the first time in a while I've heard us really, really get behind the players and sing like Irene when we conceded. Remember when we used to do that every goal? We did that last night for the first time in ages. And I think a lot of that was down to Tom Nichols, because he did put himself about. And I think one of my criticisms about him, and probably maybe still is, I'm really on the fence with him, is that he's too lightweight, and I think he muscled Webster off the ball for his goal. He was putting himself around. He really gave Bong a hard time when he went over to that side. His link-up play, I think we can all agree that's kind of where he is best, just behind the strikers. I think his link-up play is really good, but his finishing, not so much maybe. His strength, not so much. Whereas last night, especially, he showed a lot of that. And then when he did go into the hole just behind the strikers, I think he lost a little bit there. I think he was better as the front two with him and Adebayo.
Okay, yeah. James, do you think he should start against Burton, or do you think...
Well, I just think he's going to. I don't think there's any... I think I guess he has to. I mean, the thing is with Tom Nichols, throughout it all and throughout kind of Graham Coughlan's management of him, he's always maintained the key to Tom Nichols, the key to winning his heart, lads, the key to, like, when you send that 3 o'clock text to get the come round, is his confidence. Okay, he is a confidence player. When you see him as a kind of a bloke away from football, he's not extrovert. He's not kind of like life and soul of the dressing room. He's a little bit insular, a little bit quiet. I mean, unsure of himself's a little bit harsh, but he's not. He doesn't kind of exude confidence.
He's not got the ego that strikers should have.
Precisely. And I think, and again, sorry, I'm constantly waving this Graham Coughlan shaped flag, but I do think his management of him has been really good. Time will tell. We're only in August. There's only a few games, 2 and 2. Okay, great. What happens if that's 2 and 15 come November, December?
Or 2 and 80 as it was.
Well, yeah. But what he's done over the summer in terms of maintaining his confidence, and all the players will tell you on the training ground how great he is. But obviously there's training ground players and there's match day players, and the match day players tend to be the ones who kind of can break through that mental barrier, if you want. And I think Tom Nichols, if you look at his performances, particularly towards, and obviously that's when I was kind of watching him the most, towards the end of the season, when he really looked as if everything was getting on top, everything was covered with shins, kind of like 50p feet, that kind of thing. But against Brighton, as you alluded to, as you said, with like Webster and Bong, these are, I know obviously Webster's just moved up from the Championship, but these are like essentially Premier League footballers, and he was more than a match for them. His touch was good. He was obviously we know his energy, we know his work rate, we know he'll close down players, get win a 50-50 block and Tom Nichols and all this. But there was like nice touches in there. He was keeping the ball. He was holding, and obviously a great finish. And I do think it is all down to confidence, and to maintain that confidence is to keep him in the team.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's definitely given Coughlan a selection headache in a good way up front, because Smith has also been fantastic.
But the interesting thing with the strikers is Coughlan's he's got this device now where he starts two. So it was Clark, Harrison, Smith, and last 20 he'll bring on. Eventually they'll finish the game with the other two.
Yeah.
And I know perhaps of the four, Adebayo hasn't quite had that moment, if you like, of like, wow. But he's done a pretty solid job whenever he's been asked to. Blackpool was kind of his start, and it didn't quite work out for him. But he did a solid enough job. And I think he's got four strikers, and they're all kind of doing something individually. But where he can rotate, obviously we know Clark Harris is number one, but they can all kind of move around that. And okay, so if Tom Nichols starts on Saturday, Accrington's the next game, isn't it? After
Accrington at home, yeah.
Yeah. So say those two games.
No, it's not. It's Burton.
Burton this
Sorry,
Saturday.
Burton then Accrington.
Burton this Saturday, and then Accrington the following Saturday.
So he starts against Burton, starts against Accrington, doesn't quite work out. Okay, brings Tyler Smith back in.
It's good to have that option, because last season we were sort of stuck with Riley, who maybe doesn't have the qualities at this level that we need.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think they all kind of bring, and I hate to bring kind of other sports into it, and especially to some fans, they might not like rugby chat, but like this kind of concept that like Eddie Jones has with England of finishers, whereby he has kind of his starting team to do a job for 3/4 of the match, and then the guys come off the bench to finish it off. And I think with his strikers, there seems to be, and maybe I'm overanalyzing it, I don't know, I often do this, but it seems the strikers that come on, from the games I've seen, everyone who's come on, at least in an attacking sense, has done something. And I think that's a definite kind of like game plan he's got. And also as well, because he's having to manage Johnson Clark Harris's minutes here as well, that it's a nice kind of device he's got, that he can bring the two on for the last 15 minutes and something does happen, whether that be maintaining a lead, nicking a goal, keeping the defence occupied, all these kind of things. And it's obviously proving successful as it stands.
Absolutely, and this is it. I mean, last season we didn't have that. You want your substitute players to improve you rather than to substitute for fitness. You want it to be an impact sub. Ellis Harrison used to be a fantastic impact sub with his pace and his effort that he put in. But last season, it would be starting Nichols and JCH. They'd be tired. You'd bring on Jakubiak. You'd bring on Riley, and they would just not have the quality at this level to score goals late on or create those late goals. I know Riley got a couple from substitute appearances, but really compared to Smith and Adebayo, no disrespect to Jakubiak and Riley, but it's another level for me from what I've seen. And it's good, like you say, to have a player coming off the bench who's not just fresh legs, who can be a threat against tired defenders and actually improve us later on in the game and hopefully get us points and carry us up the table. Okay, last point on Nichols. Out of contract at the end of the season. I know he's a big wage. Is he in the shop window? Is he maybe playing up for that?
I mean, that's a fair point. And from his perspective, in terms of wanting to earn a contract and or attract a potential employee, I mean, I think that's a very reasonable conclusion to draw. But kind of speaking to him, I kind of grabbed him in the car park as it goes, as I was leaving the game on Tuesday night, and he was wandering to his car with his very proudly holding the man of the match champagne, and he just had a little kind of quick chat, but it's all about confidence, and he is feeling good. And there might be kind of underlying reasons there because he's thinking beyond next summer, but I just think he just looks happier, feels better about himself on the field. And that might be a result of things that occur on a pitch, because like an out-of-confident player can step on the pitch, hang on, score a goal, and all of a sudden everything changes. But I just think he does feel more content, and it's being replicated in his performances But yeah, I think the point you make is perfectly valid in terms of, because every footballer is ultimately playing for their future in some way or another.
Absolutely, and they're not fans of the club.
Whether
they're
that be
employees,
to keep their place in the team, goal bonus, earn new contracts, earn transfer. I mean, every player is effectively doing that in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. Speaking for myself, I am back on board the Nichols train for this season.
I knew you would be.
Matt, are you on board? Are you jumping on board with us?
No, absolutely not. You're going to say we should offer him a long-term contract so we don't lose out on him in the summer, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's my one big fear, is that he's going to score 20 and leave on a free.
No, I'm not.
You're not on board?
I'm still on the fence. I'll wait and see how he does the next 5 games. If he scores another 5 in the next 5 games, I'll jump on the hype train. But no, it's way too early for me.
James?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a dedicated holiday to Tom Nichols Island, so I would probably go with it, to be honest. But I think, again, it's going to all come down to finance. And again, almost like linking back to our original conversation, what sort of financial state are Bristol Rovers Football Club going to be in 12 months' time? And I'm not sure a contract decision can be made right now.
Yeah.
It might be able to be made in January. It might have to wait till, for example, to replicate this summer, where obviously James Clark, Tom Lockie was always going. Who else was out of contract?
Joe
Partington was out of contract. It might have to wait until we get to that, depending on what happens with the previous conversation we had. Again, I'm sounding very vague, but there may not be a decision, no matter how well he does or he doesn't, that a decision can't be made till much later down the line anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that sort of rounds it up for this week. Before we sign off, this month we launched our Patreon campaign, and we were overwhelmed with the response that we got from you guys. We can't thank you enough for your support. This will go towards helping us improve as a podcast and producing a better quality of content for you. Special thanks to Ashley Perry, Michael Willett, Jack Newcomb, Kevin Hennessy, Paul Rice, Matt Burton, Nathan Cartmel, Paul Tanner, Kath Savoury and Alex Jarman. Thank you so much, guys, for becoming patrons. We hope we can make it up to you. If you'd like to become a patron, you can sign up. Go to patreon.com/GasCast and sign up for either the $3 or $7 tiers. Again, don't ask me why it's in dollars. It's an American company. Both will get you into our exclusive Facebook group. You'll also be entered into priority draws for all of our prize giveaways this season, which will give you a greater chance of winning. Thanks for listening, and up the gas.
Up the gas.
I have to remain impartial on these things.